Hi, beautiful people. Welcome to the Fort Salem Library, where we read you your fanfiction. So sit down or don't, relax or don't, and enjoy these stories in a way you have not before. We at Fort Salem Library do not own Motherland Fort Salem or any of the related characters. The Motherland Fort Salem series is created by Elliot Lawrence and owned by Freeform. This story is a work of fanfiction and is meant for entertainment only. We are not making any profit from these stories. All rights of the original Motherland Fort Salem story belong to Freeform. We also do not own No Price Too High or any of its original characters and storylines. This story was created and written by Lisbeth_1, and you can find it on Archive of Our Own. No Price Too High. One of the first things Sarah Alder had said to Tally when they first got together was, discretion above anything else. Because while Sarah had assured Tally time and again that they, was something she wanted, she didn't want the other generals and Wade breathing down her neck about what exactly it was that she was doing with a cadet. Not until they figured it out for themselves, at the very least. It is something that Tally is more than happy to agree to. Her relationship with Sarah is new and exciting, something that she herself can hardly believe is real some days. And she knows that the moment the truth comes out, the bliss and excitement will disappear, pushed away by her well-meaning sisters with inane questions about Sarah's intentions, her well-being, her safety, as if she could possibly ever be unsafe in Sarah's presence. No, Tally is more than happy to keep her relationship with Sarah hidden, and while she isn't always the best at lying, she does her best to remain discreet. She isn't entirely sure, though, just how discreet making out with Sarah in her dorm room is. Sure, it's the weekend, and Abigail and Rael have both disappeared for a few hours, presumably to spend time with their own partners. And sure, the door is locked, and both Em and Gregorio are off base for the day, leaving the segment coven entirely empty, save for Tally and the woman currently pinning her to the bed. But no, Tally thinks, this probably wasn't the best place to do this. The thought quickly leaves her head the moment she feels Sarah's teeth sink into her collarbone, and when Sarah slides off her own jacket, undershirt quickly going with it. Tally isn't even sure she knows the meaning of the word discretion anymore. Tally has no more than popped the button on Sarah's pants, eager to get her long legs out of them, when the doorknob rattles. Tally's hands freeze on the waist of Sarah's pants, the woman pushing off of her slightly to look at the door in panic, hands still pressed to Tally's breast when they hear a curse from the other side of the door. Why the fuck is this locked? Sarah's head snaps back to Tally, panic morphing into mild fear, and then they both leap off the bed. Get in the closet, Tally whispers under her breath, shoving the half-naked general in the direction of her shared closet with her sisters, and Sarah huffs, Tally, surely there must be a better. Sarah's protests die in her throat the moment the doorknob begins to turn fully, and she, still managing to somehow look dignified, rushes forward and disappears into the closet. Tally just barely manages to throw her shirt and jacket in after her, swinging the closet door closed as the bedroom one opens. A very confused-looking Abigail steps in, eyeing Tally warily. Why did you lock the door? Did I? Tally goes for casual, but her heart is racing, chest rising and falling just a touch too fast. I wasn't aware that I had. You weren't aware that you traced a sigil over the doorknob and locked the door? Abigail asks, arching an eyebrow at Tally. Tally just smiles innocently at her. Must have been habit. Right. Abigail side-eyes her for a moment longer. Well, I just came back to get my jacket. Adele and I are going into Salem. Okay, Tally nods quickly, thankful that Abigail isn't planning on staying too long, and she closes her eyes briefly in relief. That is, until she remembers just where Abigail's jacket is. Her eyes fly back open in horror, hand reaching out as if she could grab Abigail and yank her away from the closet door before she manages to get it open. "Abigail, wait!" Abigail turns to frown at her, the door to the closet halfway open, and Tally can see a slight rustling of clothes from inside, from where Sarah is making a futile attempt to hide further back in. "You okay, Tal?" She sounds equal parts confused and concerned, and Tally's stomach clenches. "I'm fine," she squeaks out, and Abigail's frown only deepens. "Just, you can't..." Her mind is racing to come up with something, anything, to get Abigail to step away from the closet and leave without her jacket. But in the split second she takes to think about what she could possibly even say, she has already lost Abigail's attention. "You look like you could use a nap, Tally," Abigail comments mildly, turning back to the closet. "You're looking kinda... Holy fuck!" Abigail lets loose an uncharacteristic yelp, taking several steps backwards, in surprise as her eyes finally land on Sarah, still missing her shirt and jacket, pants still unbuttoned, standing still as a statue in her closet. "General?" she squeaks out, eyes bulging, unable to tear them away from the sight in front of her. "Cadet," Sarah says stiffly in response, but she is holding her pile of clothing tightly to her chest, eyes straight on something over Abigail's head. "What are you doing in the closet?" "I assure you, Cadet, I have not been in the closet since 1873. "Oh, well, that's..." Abigail blinks for a moment, confused. "Well, good for you, ma'am. But what I actually meant was, with all due respect, why the fuck are you in my literal closet?" "Ah," Sarah's eyes dart over to look at Tally for a brief moment, looking red-faced and on the verge of passing out, and Abigail follows the movement. "Wait!" Her head whips back and forth between the General and Cadet, and Sarah winces slightly. "Are you two Cadet!" Sarah says sharply, and Abigail's mouth snaps shut, straightening to attention, instincts apparently not caring that her General is in a state of undress. "If you will excuse me, I will go into the bathroom, get dressed, and leave. You may ask Cadet Craven whatever you wish, and whatever she does and does not want to tell you is entirely up to her. But you will take care to not repeat anything that has just happened here to anyone. Is that clear?" Abigail nods wildly, eyes still wide. "Yes, ma'am," she says quickly, and she turns away to stare at the extremely embarrassed Tally as Sarah slips by them both into the small bathroom to get properly dressed. "Tally, what the fuck?" Abigail hisses, and she grabs Tally's arm, dragging her away from the bathroom door. "Are you sleeping with Alder?" "It's..." Tally's face feels as if it has been on fire since the moment Abigail has stepped into the room. "Yes, but it's not just sex, it's..." "What do you mean, not just sex?" Abigail shakes her head confused. "What, are you guys dating or something?" She half laughs, intending it as a joke, but Tally glances up at her guiltily, and her jaw drops. "Wait, no. Really? You're dating Alder?" "Yes," Tally says, unable to meet Abigail's gaze. "We've been together for a few months now. We're keeping it a secret until we figure everything out." "Figure what out?" "Well," Tally takes her lower lip between her teeth, chewing on it slightly. "It's not just as simple as saying we're together, you know. She's got the biddies and an army to run, and the president and the other generals could easily use her relationship as another way to try to remove her from power." Abigail frowns lightly at this, but she doesn't say anything. "She wanted to make sure that all of those things were things that I was okay with before we announced it. We wanted to make sure things are serious." "Do you love her?" Abigail asked questions so bluntly it takes Tally by surprise. Tally glances towards the bathroom door. "Not yet," she whispers. "But I think I'm getting there. I think I could love her more than anything." The bathroom door creaks open and Sarah steps out, looking every bit the General once again. "Cadets," she gives Abigail a tight-lipped smile before looking at Tally, and her expression unconsciously softens for a moment before she promptly turns on her heel and leaves the room. "Well, as weird as this is," Abigail says slowly, "and it's fucking weird, Abigail's gaze falls onto her bed. Covers strewn about and sheets wrinkled, and she stiffens, Tally? Yes? Abigail's head shoots to the side to look at her. Were you two having sex on my bed? Tally's face burns with another bright blush. Well, we couldn't very well do it on my bed, could we? She squeaks out. It's the top bunk, and well, we tried Rael's, but she kept hitting her head and... Oh my God, stop! Abigail holds up both her hands, forcing back a shudder. If you want to date or sleep with or fall in love with the general, fine. Whatever. Just promise me one thing. Anything, Tally says quickly. Do not, ever, have sex with her in this room again, okay? Tally looks down at the ground as another rush of blood fills her cheeks. Trust me, I don't think either of us want to. So, both your sisters know about us now? Tally squirms lightly where she is sitting on Sarah's desk. The general still seated in her chair, leaning back as she stares at Tally with eyes that give away nothing. Tally is glad that Sarah has sent the biddies away, as she is prone to do whenever Tally stops by for afternoon visits, not wanting 7 of the other women privy to this conversation. Yeah, Tally bites her lip, feeling her nose wrinkle in nervousness. I made them both swear not to tell anyone, though, not even Adil and Scylla. Rael said she's not sure that anyone would ever believe them if they did tell people. Sarah nods thoughtfully, but still, her eyes and expression give away no hints to what she may be feeling or thinking. And how did they take it? Honestly, a lot better than I thought they would, Tally admits. Although there were a few moments right after I told Rael that I thought for sure she was going to march over here and give you the shovel talk. Sarah's eyebrow furrow fractionally at this, and she tilts her head slightly in confusion. The shovel talk? Oh, Tally's cheeks heat up and she squirms slightly again. It's like when you care about someone and they start dating someone new, you threaten to hurt the person they're dating if they ever break your friend's heart. I see. The corner of Sarah's mouth quirks up lightly, and Tally can finally see a sparkle of humor in her eyes. Yeah, it's the same thing that Anita did after you and I kissed for the first time. Sarah's eyebrows raise at this, and she sits up straight in her chair, leaning forward slightly. Anita threatened you? Tally nods, feeling a laugh bubble up in her chest at how affronted Sarah sounds. With bodily harm? Something about me having a scar to match hers? Sarah rolls her eyes, sitting back in her chair and crossing her arms. I'll have to have a word with her about that. Threatening cadets is not in the job description of being a biddy, and certainly not when the cadet in question is my girlfriend. No, Sarah, hey. Tally gently nudges Sarah's knee with her foot, getting her to look at her. You don't need to say anything to her. She was just joking, Tally frowns. I think. Besides, she only did it because she cares about you. All right. Sarah doesn't look entirely convinced, but she lets the subject drop. Did your sisters have anything else to say? Tally feels her face go red, heat crawling up her face till she can feel it in the roots of her hair. That good, huh? Sarah says dryly. Abigail made me promise that we would never have sex in the dorm again. Sarah throws her head back as she barks out a laugh, and then she stands up, nudging Tally's legs apart and coming to stand in between them, as Tally looks up at her, cheeks still hot. If I remember correctly, Sarah says, and her voice is suddenly lower than it had been only moments ago, and Tally's breath stutters in her chest. We technically never even had sex in the dorms in the first place. She trails a hand down Tally's arm, the other one coming to rest on the outside of Tally's thigh. Not before we were so rudely interrupted. The hand she had been running down Tally's arm slides back up, going to the zipper on Tally's jacket and slowly sliding it down, eyes locked onto Tally's the entire time. It's a shame, isn't it? Sarah husks, as she steps closer to the desk, feeling Tally's legs hook around her waist as she leans in to gently bite Tally's earlobe. Lips ghosting over her witch marks. Not getting to finish, she hears Tally take a staggered breath in, hands flying up to grip at Sarah's shoulders. What we started. With Tally's jacket unzipped the whole way, Sarah slides her hand underneath Tally's shirt, palming her breast through her bra, and Tally unconsciously arches into her touch. Don't you have meetings this afternoon? Tally asks, just a touch out of breath, and Sarah throws a half-there glance at the clock. Not for another 30 minutes. She leans forward, forcing Tally down until Tally's back is flat against the desk. Sarah hovering over her, hands still up her shirt. I think we can manage, don't you? Tally grins up at Sarah, smile stretching wide across her face, and Sarah feels herself smile back, heart tugging in her chest at the sight of it. With you? Tally says, and she drops her hand to Sarah's belt, fingers looping around the buckle. I think I could manage twice. The doorknob to Sarah's office clicks uselessly in Anastacia's hand, and she frowns down at it. Unless Sarah is out, the door to her office is never locked, and Anastacia glances down at her watch, double-checking that she is, in fact, on time for her meeting with the general, and frowns again. It isn't like Sarah to not be on time, and Anastacia is just about to far-speech her and ask her where she is when she hears a muffled whisper coming from behind the door. The voice is definitely Sarah's, and Anastacia would know the sound of her mother's voice anywhere, and when she strains to listen, she can almost just make out the sound of someone else's voice, but she isn't sure who. Probably a biddy, if she had to guess, and she raises her hand, knocking on the door twice. The voices behind the door instantly fall silent, only for Sarah's to pick back up again, a little more insistent this time. But Anastacia still cannot make out what she's saying. A few long moments pass without anyone answering the door, and Anastacia is just about to knock again when it finally opens, revealing a mildly disheveled Sarah. Anastacia, Sarah greets her, and Anna's eyebrow raise just the slightest as she takes in her appearance. Her jacket is wrinkled in several places, a few of her medals and pins slightly askew, and perhaps most strangely, her hair is down. Anastacia has seen Sarah with her hair down before, but never for a meeting, and certainly never in the middle of the day. General, she greets her in return, taking in her strange appearance, and Sarah's face is strangely impassive. Is everything all right? Why wouldn't everything be all right? Sarah asks casually, almost too casually for the general's usual demeanor, and Anastacia's eyebrows slowly inch up her forehead. You look a little... Anastacia struggles to find the right word. Unkempt? She phrases it as more of a question than anything, and Sarah's eyebrows raise in return. I just don't think I've ever seen you with your hair down in the middle of the day. Sarah raises a hand, picking up some of her hair that has been draped over her shoulder, and she looks at it in mild surprise, as if she hadn't realized until now that it hasn't been pulled back in its usual ponytail or braid. Oh, she says, as she shifts her weight from one leg to another. My braid was giving me a headache, that's all. I see, Anastacia glances into the office. Well, are you going to let me in? I have another meeting right after this one. Oh, Sarah says again, and she also glances into her office, looking over her shoulder. Right, the meeting. Are you okay? Anastacia asks, starting to feel genuinely worried, and Sarah finally snaps to attention, straightening in the doorway, hands flying behind her back as she assumes the position of the general. Yes, I'm fine, she says, and she steps aside, motioning for Anastacia to step inside. Anastacia steps inside and glances around the room. She had been expecting to see the biddies, and when she is greeted with an empty office, save for Sarah and herself, her confusion only increases. Who were you talking to? She asks, turning around, and Sarah looks over at her as she closes the door. What? Before you entered the door, I heard you talking to someone, but there's no one else in here. Anastacia gestures to the empty office. Oh, Sarah says for the third time that day, and their hands fidget from where they are hidden behind her back. I was on the phone, she says lamely. On the phone, Anastacia parrots back, clearly not believing her. Achoo! God has bless you, Sarah says automatically, and Anastacia's eyebrow go up so quickly they threaten to fly off her forehead. Who was that? One of the biddies? Anastacia looks around the empty room. Sarah, the biddies aren't even here. Sarah tenses ever so slightly, eyes darting around the room nervously. Well... Achoo! Another sneeze echoes through the room, louder than the first one, and Sarah's shoulders slump in defeat. eyes closing for the briefest of moments as she struggles to maintain her composure. "Was that one of the biddies too?" Anacostia asked accusingly, crossing her arms over her chest. And Sarah sighs heavily through her nose before forcing her eyes back open. "Tally," she says, voice sounding strained, and a mix of emotions fly over Anacostia's face. You can come out now." The door to a large standing cabinet behind Sarah's desk creaks open, and Anacostia spins in place, looking absolutely flabbergasted as a sheepish Tally emerges from it, face the same color as her red hair. "Sergeant Quartermain?" Tally says stiffly, not meeting the other woman's eyes. And Anacostia realizes with a jolt of horror that Tally's pants are not on her legs where they should be, but rather bundled up in her arms, holding them in front of herself. Her eyes find their way over to Sarah. "Sorry," Tally mumbles, both looking and sounding apologetic. "It's really dusty in there." "What the hell is happening?" Anacostia manages, and while her brain has already managed to put 2 and 2 together, she's desperately hoping that the answer is somehow 5, and not the rapidly drawn 4 that she has come to. Tally's eyes widen slightly, and she looks at Sarah somewhat helplessly, unsure of what to do or say. "Well, you see, Anna," Sarah begins slowly, and she looks pained as Anacostia finally manages to tear her eyes away from Tally to look back at her. "Tally and I are," she pauses, looking for the right word, "involved." "Involved?" Anacostia repeats incredulously. "You mean like..." Her eyes dart over to Tally once more. "You two are sleeping together?" And even as she says it, she feels like passing out. "We're in a relationship," Sarah corrects her, and Anacostia's whole body stiffens in surprise. "A relationship," she repeats loudly, and her eyes flick rapidly back and forth between the red-faced Tally, still looking at the ground, and the Sarah, who looks like she would much rather be anywhere but here in this moment. Anacostia is very much wishing the same thing. "Yes," Sarah says, and her shoulders straighten once more. "Yes, a relationship." Anacostia's gaze finally settles on Sarah, looking at her curiously. "I thought you didn't do relationships." Tally says before she can speak, and both women turn to look at her. She's still looking at the ground, face still bright red. "I'm gonna put these back on," she glances uncomfortably at the pants in her arms, "and go. Yeah, I'm just gonna go." Anacostia quickly turns away as Tally begins to get fully dressed again, and out of the corner of her eye she can see Sarah move, going to stand next to her desk where Tally is half hidden behind. She can hear them whispering to each other, voices barely audible, and while she's burning with curiosity, she stays put, feet planted into the ground. She does not want to turn around only to possibly stumble upon the sight of one of her cadets kissing her mother goodbye. The knowledge that she has walked in on the aftermath of an extremely intimate moment already makes her feel as if she is on the verge of passing out. And if she were to witness Sarah kissing Tally, it would most likely be the straw that broke the camel's back. She sees movement in her peripheral vision, and chances a glance over to find Tally, now fully dressed, fleeing the room without even so much as a glance in her direction, and then Anacostia turns around to gape at Sarah, who's doing her best to maintain a professional expression. But Anacostia can see just how uncomfortable she looks. "Anacostia, what are you doing with her?" Anacostia asks accusingly before she can stop herself, and Sarah's jaw tenses. "I didn't give you permission to speak freely," Sarah says stiffly. "I didn't ask," Anacostia snaps back. "Besides, we are well past the point right now considering what I just walked in on. I know you, Sarah, and you don't do relationship, so just what exactly are you? I care about Tally a great deal." Sarah fires back, and then Anacostia's words die in her throat. "Is it so difficult to believe that I would want to be in a relationship with her, to commit to her?" Anacostia is stunned at the sudden defensiveness of Sarah's words, the way that she crosses her arms over her chest as if she needs to protect herself. "Not difficult," she says slowly as she watches as the tension slowly seeps from Sarah's shoulders, but her jaw is still set. "Just surprising? I remember you telling me more than once that love just wasn't in the cards for you." "It wasn't," Sarah says, and she unfolds her arms. "But things have changed." "So you love her?" "I don't know," Sarah says quietly. Well, I've never been in love before. You know this." She says it almost dismissively, waving her hand as she does so. I'm not sure I would even recognize it right away. "Well?" And Acacia is almost certain the conversation is going to be struck down by Sarah, wanting to keep her cards close to her chest in favor of whatever it was their meeting was supposed to be about. And Acacia, for the life of her, cannot remember. The topic of the meeting burned away by the sight of one of her cadets without their pants on, but she asks anyway. "How do you feel when you see her? When you think about her?" Sarah seems surprised by this line of questioning, but she leans back against her desk, looking thoughtful. "I feel warm." She brings her hands down in front of her, fingers nervously playing with each other as she looks down at the ground. "Fuzzy?" One hand goes up to press against her ribcage, right above where her heart is. "I feel it in my chest first, then it spreads, well, everywhere," she admits. And then Acacia's heart is hammering like mad in her own chest, because never in a million years did she think that Sarah would admit this to anyone, ever. Seeing her is like, no matter how shit my day has been, or how many people have managed to piss me off, the moment I see her, none of that matters anymore. Sarah murmurs. "I see her and everything just feels right. I can't not be happy when she is around. And then when she leaves, I watch her go, and even though I know she's just going to class or to be with her sisters, that realistically she isn't in any danger, I cannot help but worry." And Acacia goes to speak, but Sarah apparently isn't done talking. "I watch her go and it's like," Sarah swallows harshly, "it's like a piece of my heart is just out there, wandering around on its own, and I don't know how to protect her when she isn't here." She finally looks back up at Acacia with a slight grimace, and she crosses her arms over her chest once again. "That probably sounded really strange." "No," and Acacia shakes her head with a smile as she steps forward so that she can lay a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. "It sounds like you're in love." Sarah's heart feels as if it has firmly lodged itself in her throat as she makes her way down the hallway towards the war room after her meeting with Acacia. She cannot believe it. She is in love with Tally Craven. But then again, she can believe it. Tally is bright and warm, and the sight of her smile at the sound of her laughter have never failed to get Sarah's heart racing, to get her palms sweating. And while Sarah has kissed a great many people in her long lifetime, kissing Tally for the first time had felt different, had made Sarah's blood sing, and had felt like coming home. Sarah rounds the corner leading to the war room and suddenly smacks into something unseen, and she stumbles backward from the force of it, arms flying out to steady herself. She frowns, looking up and down, and when she sees nothing, takes a cautious step forward, holding her hand out in front of her. The ward just outside of the war room, the one in place to prevent any low-ranking officers from sneaking in, shimmers brightly under Sarah's palm, iridescent waves rippling from where her hand is pressed up against the barrier, the working humming and buzzing against Sarah's skin. "Sarah?" she hears Anita come up beside her. "Everything all right?" "Something is wrong with the warding," Sarah says, frowning, and to illustrate her point, she presses harder on the ward, the shimmering growing slightly in size with the force. Anita holds up her own hand, reaching out to test the ward for herself, and when her palm passes right through, she arches a brow at Sarah before stepping neatly through it to the other side. "What the?" Sarah looks at her hand, flabbergasted. "Do you have your medal?" Anita asks, and Sarah rolls her eyes, lowering her hand from the ward. "Of course I have my medal," Sarah says, and she reaches underneath the collar of her uniform jacket, hooking her finger underneath the chain and lifting the medal into view. "It's right." Sarah's eyes blow wide, and she sucks in a sharp breath. "Oh, goddess, protect," she whispers under her breath. "Sarah?" Anita sounds concerned, and she takes a step closer to her. "Is something wrong?" Sarah just stares at the medal wordlessly, mouth dry as she reads the words Tally Craven, War College Cadet, Sekhmet Coven over and over again. It is bad enough that she has Tally's medal, but Tally has her medal, and if she's caught with it... Sarah's stomach bottoms out, and she looks back up at Anita with wide eyes. We need to find Tally, now. Sarah spins on her heel, ignoring Anita's confused questions as she wades through the rest of the biddies. She rounds the corner again, making it almost to the end of the hallway, and stumbles to a halt when she is greeted by Petra, General Clary, and Isadora, all making their way towards her, presumably on the way to the war room, where they are scheduled to have their meeting. "Ah, there you are," Petra says coolly, and she eyes Sarah oddly. "You're heading in the wrong direction, aren't you?" "I have something to take care of," Sarah blurts out, and all three women raise their eyebrow at her. "I will be back shortly. You can go ahead and wait for me." "Something to take care of?" Petra repeats. "What could possibly be more important than discussing our next move against the spree?" "I will be right back," Sarah says again, a little harsher this time, and the three women in front of her all exchange confused glances as she pushes by them. She makes it only a few more steps until two more people round a corner, and Sarah's heart sinks into her stomach. Major Verger rounds the corner, cane clunking loudly against the floor, Tally trailing closely behind her, red-faced and staring at the floor. Verger comes to a stop in front of Sarah and clears her throat loudly. "Ah, General Alder, just the woman I needed to see." "Is that so?" Sarah breathes out, and she's desperately hoping that this is not what she thinks it is about. Not with the other generals and Isadora all staring at her. "Yes," Verger grabs Tally by the arm, yanking her forward slightly, and Sarah's heart clenches in her chest as Tally finally looks up to meet her gaze. "This cadet was found with something that belongs to you." Tally looks scared, but Sarah knows just from the way that Tally is looking at her pleadingly, eyes wide and lower lip trembling slightly, that she isn't afraid of whatever punishment Verger intends to give her for being caught with the general's medal. She's afraid that Sarah is going to be mad at her. "And what of mine does she have?" Sarah asks, trying to keep her voice neutral, but she can't tear her eyes away from Tally. Verger pulls Sarah's medal out of her pocket, chain clinking slightly, and the medallion sways in the air as Verger dangles it in front of Sarah's face. "I don't know how she got this, but somehow she ended up with your medal. I intend to find out how she did, and once I do..." Sarah takes one more look at Tally's terrified, pleading expression, and makes a split-second decision. "That won't be necessary," Sarah says, and she can feel the eyes of everyone crowded in the hallway on her as she takes her medal from Verger's grasp. Verger frowns slightly. "Ma'am?" Sarah straightens, finally turning to look at Verger, who is looking at her with a confused expression on her face, and she clasps her hand behind her back, the metal chain biting slightly into her fingers. "I said that won't be necessary," she repeats a little louder, "and you may let go of her. She isn't going to run off." Verger eyes Tally warily, but she drops Tally's arm per Sarah's order. "General," she begins, "if I may, a proper punish..." "That will not be necessary either," Sarah says, and both Tally and Verger look at her in shock. "I already know how she got my medal." Tally's eyes widen and Verger blinks. "You do?" "Yes," Sarah says, and she sucks in a deep breath, nerves rolling around in her stomach. "Cadet Craven and I are in a relationship." She reaches under the collar of her jacket again, pulling Tally's medal over her head and holding it out to the cadet. "The switching of medals were a simple mix-up, one that was entirely my fault, and it will not happen again." The silence in the hallway is almost deafening. One of the biddies coughs awkwardly, and Verger is still gasping at Sarah as Tally reaches out and grabs her medal, hand flying back to her side almost instantly. "You are dismissed, Cadet Craven," Sarah says gently, and Tally turns and flees almost instantly. "A cadet?" Tara turns around at the sound of Petra's voice. Isadora has a slight frown on her face, staring at the spot where Tally had been standing, and Clary has sunk back to stand next to several of the biddies, looking as if she does not want to get wrapped up in any business that is not strictly her own. "I hope you know what you're doing, Sarah," Isadora says, If President Wade finds out, I do not care, Sarah says simply, truthfully, and Petra's eyebrows fly up on her forehead. I do not care what she has to say. You might care if the president tries to use your relationship with her to... To what? Sarah challenges Petra with an arch of her brow. Blackmail me into stepping down? To honorably retire? If people find out about my relationship with Tally, then so be it. I do not care what they think, and I will not be stepping down simply because I fell in love with a cadet. This gets even Clary's attention, the woman glancing briefly over at Sarah with a mildly surprised look on her face, but she says nothing. Love? Isadora repeats. I never thought I would ever hear you use that word, Sarah. Yes, well, Sarah looks down at her feet for a moment before lifting her head again. I never thought I would ever meet someone like Tally. You told them about us? Sarah turns away from her liquor cart at the sound of Tally's odd voice. It is well past lights out now, Tally making it a habit to sneak into Sarah's room after the final call. And Sarah had been so wrapped up in her thoughts that she hadn't heard the younger girl enter. Yes, Sarah says carefully. I did. Tally swallows nervously, hands fidgeting in front of her. I'm sorry about getting the medals mixed up. I guess I grabbed the wrong one after we had sex this afternoon. I should have paid closer attention. Sarah smiles softly at her, and she makes her way over to Tally, holding out her hand as she does so. And Tally steps forward so that Sarah can run a hand down her arm. It is all right, darling. Still, Tally says, worrying her lower lip between her teeth. If I had grabbed the right one, then you never would have had to. Tally, Sarah interrupts her gently, taking Tally's hand into her own and lacing their fingers together. I am not mad that the medals got mixed up, nor am I upset about having to tell them. You aren't? Tally frowns in confusion, but Sarah can see the glimmer of hope in her brown eyes. But you said, well, you didn't want people to know until things got serious, and you especially didn't want the other generals knowing because you knew word would get back to Wade. I don't care about what Wade says, Sarah says firmly, and Tally's eyes widen. I don't care about what people think either. I only care about you, Tally. A hopeful smile flits across Tally's face for a brief moment before it is replaced with another hesitant frown. But what if they use our relationship against you? What if they... Sarah leans forward, cutting Tally off with a gentle kiss, and she can feel the tension in Tally's muscle drain away with the action. I do not care, Sarah says again, and she rests her forehead against Tally's, running her hand up and down her arm. It will be worth it. For you, it will all be worth it. She pulls back slightly so that she can look Tally in the eye again. I love you, Tally, she says, and Tally's eyes widen in surprise. There's no price that I would not be willing to pay as long as it means I get to be with you. Tally draws in a shaky breath, tears springing to her eyes as she steps into Sarah's personal space, pressing herself flat against Sarah, hand going up to wrap around the back of her neck. Oh, Sarah, she whispers against the older woman's lips, nudging their noses together as her other hand goes to Sarah's waist, squeezing tightly. Sarah, I love you too. Please find the fanfiction you just listened to on Archive of Our Own and leave the author some love. Without them, this wouldn't be possible, and we want to thank them from the bottoms of our hearts for creating these amazing stories and keeping the show alive.